Welcome back, everybody, to the Daniel Speiss podcast. This is my first of many Capital Talks where we go into great detail and the week in rewind in terms of what I've experienced as a business owner, the things I'm noticing and seeing, and to drive and take away several takeaways for you guys based off of just the day-to-day, the week-to-week of running and operating a startup in a new business. So for me, this week was very tough. It was tough because we were a man down on the force. We I feel like we've all been there where we've been overwhelmed and frustrated and over our head with the day to day. It was very testing. I was very overwhelmed doing many different things. I have sales guys coming up to me, and there's a lot of different focuses. And when you have so many different, whatever it may be, projects going on, different areas that need prioritizing, it's easy to get nothing. It's easy to get a lot done. It's easy to essentially get nothing done very quickly, because although you feel you're doing many things because you're spread out in so many different directions, you're not really, when you really zoom out, you don't really recognize that things aren't really getting done as quickly and as qualitatively as you might presume. To feel that you're doing a million things and I'm getting a lot done, but when you take a step back, for me, for example, this week, and the needle has not moved as much as you'd hope, you realize and you recognize that this was a week or a day where there was a lack of focus. There was a lack of laser-sightedness. And so what I mean by that, I mean, I'll give you a real example here. It's still and it's still pending, but we might not have we might lose one or two deals that we worked on last week just because I was overwhelmed, and I take ownership of that. And for really outlandish and crazy reasons too. It's reasons that we probably shouldn't have lost the potential deals. But part of that process is, I think the biggest challenge I faced this week was, and I'm usually good at this, delegating. I'm normally really good at delegating and telling people, hey, cover this, let me show you how. And I didn't do a really great job this week of that. I felt very overwhelmed, and I didn't lead in a way that allowed others to move on their own, to get their own autonomy with what they needed to get done to move things forward. It doesn't go to say that this is every day. We all find ourselves in short periods of time where life is just tough. Things get very complex and tough, and life has a way of testing our elasticity, how elastic we are as people. And it's funny because when I talk about this, I literally think about a conversation I had with a friend of mine who actually went through the exact same thing with his company. And he essentially, what I heard from him was, the growth is only getting tougher and tougher. Building the company is only getting more and more complex in a lot of different ways. And we are really tested as leaders because we're the first line of defense when it comes to putting out fires and fixing things. We have to wake up every day, and whatever problem comes our way, we have to fix it. We have to own that, regardless of how big that monster is. And this week was one of those weeks for me. I think there's a lot of good things this week, but there's a lot of tough things. And I think when we have weeks, not even just in business, but I think when we feel overwhelmed and we feel life is really, really hard and we feel there's not enough progress being made, it's important to realize that we are designed to have resilience. We're designed to be able to last the storms. Our feet could just keep walking no matter how tired we get. We're designed to recover and recoup. So I think a big lesson, a big takeaway from this week is there's just going to be some weeks with whatever you're doing in life, whether it's business, interpersonally, and you're going to be worn out, and you're gonna feel very exhausted. You're gonna feel very tired, and you're not necessarily going to question the purpose and mission and vision of what you're doing, but you're going to feel a little beat up. And I think the lesson here is to think in terms of resilience. If you never give up, you always move forward. If you can identify the mistakes, you can convert them into lessons. If you can pause and just zoom out and recognize where you are and what needs to get done, then odds are you can see what you're doing operationally in a different way. Now, I definitely had that failure this week. I definitely could have taken a step back and said, hey, whoa, I'm doing a lot of things and I need to reprioritize operationally what my focus is. Ironically, I'm not so terrible about delegating. And this week was definitely tough. It was tough. But it just goes to show that sometimes even our strengths have a hard time demonstrating our strengths when we're overwhelmed. And when you're not preoccupied, but when you have too much to focus on, when you don't delegate, um, when I think part of my challenge is I want to get so much done and I want to take that ownership for myself. That is a potential killer when you want to take on too much and not give to everybody around you to help out. To feel a certain level of ownership where you have to do it yourself, that's not necessarily how I feel, because typically I just do. And when I see something that needs to get done and I need to put out a fire, I need to solve something, just go out and do it without really thinking about its toll, right? Because just because you can do something doesn't mean you should go and do it. Because by you doing it and not allowing either a partner, maybe interpersonally, or a team member, business wise, you're withholding the opportunity for somebody else to take that responsibility, to step up, to demonstrate effort, to be a team player. It takes away from other people being able to step up, to be useful, to demonstrate their value. People want to naturally help. And so, although it's not necessarily something I don't think about, but I think there's a good lesson here in delegation and often reprioritizing what your tasks are, right? Typically, I try to get the most important tasks done in the beginning of the day, but running a sales organization, there's a lot of chaos sometimes, and throughout the chaos, there needs to be some level, baseline level of vigilance, regardless of how fast the winds are blowing. You must have certain weighted shoes that keep you grounded on that walk, so that you just don't fly up in the air. So throughout every day, there needs to be some level of groundedness. How can we do better when it comes to showing up for the business, your team, yourself, people you care about, in these kinds of ways? We have to first recognize that we're not superhuman, that we have certain capacities to get things done. We're only so elastic. Obviously that elasticness is getting more and more elastic as time goes on, as quote unquote monsters being challenges or problems that need to be solved. And the farther you go, the bigger the problems. So I think there's a lesson there in this, recognizing when to delegate, being more mindful of how cumbersome you're becoming, throughout the day. If you feel wow, yeah, I'm in way over my head, I got 4 or 5 things to do, it is time to release some of that burden. And that's super important, especially when you're running a business, especially when you're running a family too, because if you cannot move swiftly and confidently with what you're doing, so that you can focus on the higher level tasks, the higher level goals at hand, and you get stuck doing the tasks that you shouldn't be doing, it's actually a net negative for everybody. There's a book called Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martle. Very good book, because it talks about not succumbing to tasks that are way below your skill level. You're not even just really your pay grade, but they're not even in your box of things you should be doing. The things that give me energy and that are high revenue generating, versus the other boxes that aren't as low revenue generating tasks and things that take away my energy. It's very easy, if you don't know thyself, which I've read this book, I know I know what those things are, but you don't know thyself, you're going to easily fall into the task trap, overburdening yourself. And that's not the ideal way to test your flexibility. You have to align yourself You have to calibrate yourself more of tasks that make sense for you to do and outsource, even if it costs something, tasks that aren't meant for you. Because odds are there are people around you or people that you could hire that would really enjoy those tasks and potentially do them better than you. And the thing that I've adopted when it comes to this is as long as you delegate and the folks who are doing these tasks and helping you, the items that you're outsourced, whether they be projects or actual tasks, as long as they're completing them with 70 to 80% quality of how you would handle it, that's still a win. So when I look back at this week, I think in terms of, and we always have to think of this. I always try to think in terms of a scorecard. How did I do in terms of a leader? How did I do in terms of an operator? How did I do in terms of being a person with my limitations? Running a business, starting whatever endeavor you may be starting, it takes a lot of honesty. It takes just takes a lot of ownership and accountability. And when you go down this path, it's really challenging because there's very few people that want to go down this path and self-realize and self-actualize, because without self-actualizing, business gets very, very complicated. How you could have done better, not just for yourself, but for your team, for the business. And I think one of the things that resurfaced in my head multiple times over the weekend was usually the most important tasks are the things that we tend to avoid. And they're a lot easier to avoid, unfortunately, when you have a lot of other distractions of things that also look quote unquote important. So that's really my biggest that's the biggest pet peeve I have for myself is doing the work that needs to be done, the stuff that moves the needle, and making that happen and getting my team on board with what's going to move the needle and supporting my team on what's going to move the needle for them. And at the end of the day, if you're listening to this and, it's all you and you're either a one-man band or you don't have anybody else besides you, that's a tough place to be because that's a lot of grind. It's a lot of grit to be able to withstand that day after day. I guess what I'm trying to say is when you give responsibility to others, it allows everybody to move a lot more quicker because you're less weighted down by the weight of all these things that you can't do if you're overloaded. So you just have to be careful of that, and you have to identify more quickly when you're starting to get overwhelmed in that kind of way. And you need to identify it, and you need to have a plan to offload that to supporters around you. And if you don't have supporters around you, then it's really more about than just prioritizing the top things that need to happen and the things that can wait. And typically, for example, right, I usually leave Sundays to admin work because I don't like doing admin work on the weekdays because weekdays is for making things happen. And every day I have a certain designation, Tuesdays I take meetings, Thursdays I focus on insurance. So I have a focus for every day of the week. And then once it's Sunday, that's when I can go to the back end. I can set up the week ahead, planning, strategy, admin. I think we all need to do this in some way. Mental fatigue is such a big thing. As for my year in rewind of building BH, mentally switching over and over and over again, not only just the overwhelmingness of what you could be potentially doing, but the sheer fatigue you can get just by switching to marketing mode and then switching to operations mode, switching to sales mode, back to operations mode. These modes are so exhausting to switch back and forth to. There's so much energy waste. There's so much energy waste when you're switching modes. Yeah, it's really wild. If you want like an easy example, imagine you're in marketing mode, you're setting up, text campaigns, email campaigns. Now you're switching to sales. Now you're putting your sales hat on. It's when you're switching multiple hats at once. And when you experience this switching, not just but it's one thing just to be overwhelmed with things to do and then feeling overwhelmed, but then also to feel the fatigue of switching different hats throughout the day. That's why I like to day block certain tasks for like one day out of the week for each day, right? And you just segment each day to do those tasks only. You don't do anything else because you can get a lot more done with a lot more quality when you stay in those specific modes. So what are some takeaways here? A lot of takeaways. In terms of leadership, though, Think about how you're showing up for or not showing up for your team, and how your actions reflect the results of the week, or the current results. Think about resilience. The goal is just to continue our march forward. It's a long journey, and we're going to have ups and downs. But if you believe that the market is going to trend up, then you dollar average in continuously. If you feel like the market is downtrending, then you place your bets on the flip side. So the point here is resilience, and it's one thing to be resilient. It's one thing just to say, hey, I'm just gonna weather this storm. Okay, great. But you still need to take care of yourself. You still need to balance out. You still need to figure out. You still need to mitigate the challenges within those moments, right? So part of being resilient is really understanding how to bob and weave better, how to set yourself up in terms of a formula to take care of things as they happen. Being resilient is knowing when to conserve energy, when to delegate, when it's to kind of know when to expect ups and downs, right? It's getting more of a grip on this flow, right? Leveraging your team and allowing them the opportunity to show up and come in and help and support and be a part of the overall effort and mission. It's so easy to be narrow-sighted, and because you're caught up in the battle day to day, you're not seeing the long-term vision. You can't commit to the long-term focus and the planning and the forecasting, and that's why all these things I'm mentioning that's why it's so important to take that step back, to zoom out, to see the bigger picture, because without being able to zoom out and to look at the direction that you're heading, and to look into the distance. Not only that, but to speak to other people about this, to have people who really understand and get this, to stay motivated. Part of it is determination, right? When I think about BH's future success, I know we'll succeed. I know we'll succeed because we'll persevere. We have a solid foundation. We have a solid plan. We know exactly where we're going and how to get there. And the goal is to make that vision as clear as possible in the steps you take now and in the steps that you're going to take. Short term, longer term, longer term, longer term. That's what creates the whole path. And it's tough to stay motivated when you're kicked around. It's tough to stay motivated when you are getting beaten up. Business, if you're not getting beaten up in business, you're not succeeding, because it means that you're not putting yourself out there, and that you're not driving as much as you need to, unless you're a unicorn and you've discovered some untapped market and no one's showed up yet. It's easy to be motivated when things are going great, but you just can't have motivation on one side of that. You have to be able to go above the water and under the water with the same level of motivation and determination. And I think the biggest thing that, the biggest highlight here is just not giving up in general. When we talk about persistence and perseverance and resilience, we're just weathering the storm. And we know that the sun is just going to come around any minute, any day now, any hour. We know that the sun is just around the bend of the darkness, right? Of the rain, the storm, whatever we're in, whatever the tornado. And it's being confident in what you want and what you're making happen. And it gets a lot, and it's tougher to have motivation when you're not doing the ingredients of what constitutes progress. When you're not doing the tasks that constitute that path that you're on, that path forward, then yeah, it's tough to get motivated if there's no movement. But if there's movement, if you're building, if you're driving, if you're making changes, if you're making it happen, if you're seeing advancements, and there's still ups and downs, that through every shortcoming, there's a lesson that allows you to slingshot forward. Through every win, every small win, it's a small win towards the future. In my mind, everything's a win. All the failures, all the things we do wrong, and then we correct swiftly, all the things that we do right, every bet hire, every good hire, every marketing mistake, every good marketing win, everything that we do, it fills up the blueprint and the formula for getting into our future of what we imagine, of where we imagine it to be heading out to. It's paving that way. The bricks are not laid with successes. They're laid with freaking everything. I think that's the most raw visual I can provide, is the bricks of this path to the future that you're trying to build are not paved with just bricks of wins or bricks of losses. It's bricks of everything that you can possibly grab and get your hands on. It's a brick of wins, it's a bricks of losses, it's a brick of people sometimes, it's a brick of lost money, it's everything. Dirt, gravel, crap. There's so much that that path is paved with. So many different materials. A lot of, and then people look at that and they go, wow, you got so far, or that person got so far. Look at Elon Musk, look at this person. They've made it. Wow, they're incredible. Well, it was paved. That road was paved with war. It was paved with grit. It was paved with blood, sweat, and tears. And that's what true success is paved with. And so you have to do business, to pave your own way, to build something special. It's paved with a little bit of everything. But as long as you are paving it, and as long as you are weathering the storm, and you're doing all these things that we've mentioned, being resilient, being accountable, testing your elasticity, and just staying in it, staying in the game, you're gonna get there. It's just a matter of it being sooner than later or later than sooner. So I hope you like this Capital Talk, and more to come. See you next Sunday. Talk to you soon, guys.